Goes big again. What a wonderful hit this is.
Harmanpreet to take that game away single-handedly was a fantastic result.
And it sparked something special for women's cricket in New Zealand.
So suddenly it was okay for a young Indian to dream of bowling quick.
Hello and welcome to Cricket Inside Out this week. As usual, we are answering all of your burning questions. We're also discussing whether a smaller ball for women's cricket is the answer, or perhaps there are some other experimental changes that could be considered. We're also compiling our wish list of destinations, cricketing destinations that is, and we're getting the show underway, taking a look at some of the greatest ODI upsets ever. Joining us on the show today, Harsha Bhogle in India, where apparently the monsoon has started. Welcome to the show, Harsha.
Thank you very much. We are in three different parts of the world, aren't we? You have snow and we have the rain.
Yes, and then Ian Smith is in New Zealand, where life is back to normal. They had sold out stadiums watching rugby over the weekend, and the rest of the world, well, we all looked on with envy.
I'm sure you did, Elma. Good evening to all of you and all people watching from around the world. Yes, very special. 37 or 38,000 going to a game of rugby outside of a test match is virtually unheard of. So New Zealanders answered with their feet. They were delighted to be allowed to go outside and mix and mingle and do the things they've been brought up to do, actually. But I think the best memory for me, to be perfectly honest, of the weekend was just over my shoulder here. There's a sports ground where they've got 8 soccer fields where they play a lot of junior sport. And to watch that field last weekend full of kids running around having fun with a smile on their face playing football, I mean, that was even more rewarding to see everyone sort of getting back out and about. So we're lucky at the moment. Things are hanging in pretty good for New Zealand. We just wish the rest of the world can join the fun very quickly.
Yeah, and we can't wait for cricket to return. Of course, we're all counting down. The West Indies are in England, and there is the promise of some test cricket on the horizon. Look at Harsha. You can even see his face is just, warming up, and the smile is getting broader just at the thought of this.
No. I know. I honestly can't wait. I've been literally locked into my house now for 3.5 months, just an odd visit here and there. I realized how much I've been missing cricket, actually. Yeah.
Okay, well, this week in 2005, 15 years ago, can you believe it? Bangladesh stunned Australia, one of the greatest ODI upsets ever. Some people say the greatest ODI upsets ever. The Aussies couldn't defend 249 runs in Cardiff. A lot of people say that isn't fair, though. Mohammad Ashraful made his first ODI 100 at a run a ball, upstaging the mightiest 11 in world cricket. Before the match, Bangladesh had won only 9 of their 107 one-dayers. Harsha Bhogle, tell us about this ODI upset and what made it unique, exceptional, what brought it on. Did you see it coming?
I think we were in Harare, actually, in somebody's house watching it happen. And the fact that Bangladesh won was a huge surprise. I know Bangladesh cricket very well. I know the enormous enthusiasm that accompanies cricket there, but also a lot of despair around those times at whether they'll win. But watching Ashraful was just fantastic for me, because just a few months earlier, I was in a commentary box watching him make 158 against India. He was toying with India's bowling. And I remember thinking the world of cricket has got 2 great talents coming up in 2004. One was Michael Clarke, who got a 150 against India in Bangalore on debut. This is Ashraful getting 150 in Chittagong. But it was a fantastic result. Within 2 years of that result, Shakib, Tamim, Mushfiq had come, and better days had started to come for Bangladesh.
Have you got one or two others that you think would make a list if we had to compile the best ODI upsets, Harsha?
I was in a studio watching it happen when Ireland beat England in the 2011 World Cup, and Kevin O'Brien played produced one of the great ODI hundreds. But for me, and it might be a slightly unpopular opinion in my own country, But that West Indies team of 1983, you just look back at that side: Greenwich, Haynes, Richards, Lloyd, Logie, Dujon, Roberts, Holding, Marshall, Garner, and India, who'd won virtually nothing at a World Cup before going there in 1983, to win that World Cup final, I mean, you have to call it an upset, but it was to my mind one of the greatest wins.
And it meant a lot for the nation. And I think that's often what we look for when we turn our attention to these big ODI results. Smithy, some of your favourite memories?
I was going to be scared to bring up 1983 because I thought Harsha might say that was never a surprise, India beating the West Indies. But the way they did it, because I think they only defended about 180 against that fantastic West Indies lineup. Having said that, they also had to endure Marshall, Holding, Roberts and Garner, who were pretty handy in their day, it's fair to say. I'm going to chuck another one at you, Harsha, from that same tournament. How about Zimbabwe beating Australia by 13 runs, with Duncan Fletcher scoring 69 not out and 4 for 42. That, as their first appearance at World Cup level with the big boys, I think that would have to go down as one of the greatest upsets. I'll stay on the Irish theme for it, if you like. How about Pakistan 132 in the West Indies, and that in the 2007 World Cup, and Ireland 133-7. Now that was a major World Cup upset, which really did spark a lot of stuff.
And there he is. Trent Johnson has hit the winning run.
Historic pictures. Ireland had beaten Pakistan and beaten them out of this World Cup.
To be fair, you know, there was a lot of talk about that game, but there was also talk about Sri Lanka beating Australia in 1996 to win their first World Cup, their only World Cup, chasing down 241, and that was a good Australian side. They did it with ease. Aravinda 107, Ranatunga 47, both not out, 245 for 3. We really shouldn't have been surprised about that, but I think it did. I think it did shake the cricketing world somewhat to have a new champion too, and Sri Lanka fully deserved it.
Zim versus Australia was a good call, and Smithy only found it because he did a search saying matches Australia lost. And sure as ever that popped up.
Any upsets in the women's game that have caught your eye over the years that you think, maybe change the course of what we expect from certain nations?
Well, I'll go first here. I'm going to go first, Harsha. Patriotically, I'm going to go first here, in case you steal it, by the way. Look, New Zealand won their first Women's World Cup in the year 2000. They were hosting the World Cup in Christchurch at 2 or 3 venues, special venues down there. They were up against Australia in the final. And they were only defending 184, and Belinda Clark, that fantastic Australian batsman, scored, I think, 91 herself out of the chasing total, and they missed out by 4 runs. It was a spectacular game. I didn't commentate it, but I remember watching it on television, and just the exhilaration of the players from New Zealand, their fans, their families running onto the field, embracing. It was a major surprise. And it sparked something special for women's cricket in New Zealand. And, I think it was a bit of a launching pad and a situation where we felt like we could belong against England and Australia and those sides that we perhaps battled with for a while. But that was a wonderful victory, a slight upset, but the one that comes to mind so readily for me.
Mine is a little more recent, Elma. India were at the World Cup of 2017, and we didn't quite know what to expect. We knew Mithali was a good player. Smriti Mandhana had started all well. That Harmanpreet was a good player. Julan was still around. But that innings of, 170 thereabouts against Australia. I mean, I knew of Alisa Healy, Meg Lanning, Elise Perry, superstars of the women's game. And for Harmanpreet to take that game away single-handedly was a fantastic result. Not a major surprise, but yeah, I mean, as results go, a bit of an upset, yes.
Let us know if you have some of your favorite ODI upsets that you'd add to our list. Speaking of the women's game, though, during the week, Kiwi captain Sophie Devine appeared on the ICC's 100% Cricket Innovation webinar. It was really interesting. Go back and watch it if you haven't seen it. She suggested that a smaller, lighter ball might encourage more attacking women's cricket.
If it's going to help the game flourish, I think why not? Why would we not have a crack at it and see what happens? I think you've always got to have a bit of trial and error and see what works. I'm probably a bigger fan of looking at a smaller ball but keeping the pitch the same size. That way I reckon bowler's going to be able to bowl the ball quick. I think spinners are going to be able to turn the ball more. Hopefully the ball should fly a bit further as well, whereas he's still keeping, I guess, the traditional length of the pitch.
Now, the women's regulation ball at this stage is already a tiny bit lighter and a tiny bit smaller. The question is, do you agree? Harsha, let's start with you. What are the aspects to this that we should consider when we want to promote a more attacking game?
I'm not in favor of anything that shows the women's game to be even a little lesser than the normal cricket as we've known it for a while, and not allow people to say, oh yeah, they can't play off 22 yards, or oh no, they have to bring the boundary ropes in. I'm actually a big one for pushing the boundary ropes back in the women's game, because I mean, I saw Elisa Healy, you see Liz Lee, you see the couple of South African girls are big hitters, you see Shafali Verma has come in. So I'm not in favor of anything that makes the game look visually very different or even lesser. The ball itself, there's about a 10-11 gram difference. If you make it even lesser, you could reach a stage where at the lower end of the allowable weight spectrum versus the slightly higher end of the men's ball allowable weight spectrum, we've got about 25 gram difference. I don't know if that's too much. I've not played with a ball that light. But if a slightly lighter ball, slightly smaller ball, maybe with a little more pronounced seam, allows bowlers to do a little bit more, then I'm okay with it. But my first reaction is we've just come off an absolutely outstanding Women's World Cup. I don't mind this, but I think the women's game is rising so rapidly, is growing so rapidly, that I'm happy for it to stay as it is.
Ian Smith, you're a former player. Tell us what difference a few grams this way or that way makes, and particularly in the women's game, if you are talking about women with smaller hands, isn't it perhaps the appropriate thing to do, since rugby, all sport equipment, in rugby they're talking about smaller rugby balls, in football they're talking about smaller goals, in hockey they're talking about adapting equipment. Should equipment not be adapted for women, and then where is the point at which you stop adapting it?
Point one, I'm with Harsha. Don't bring the dimensions in anymore. Don't make the arena any smaller, because I think that takes something away from that. I look at golf, Elma, and that's a sport that you're close to, you know a lot about. What has been the thing that has changed golf to a large degree? Equipment. The equipment for the players to be able to hit the ball further. Harsha, you'd agree that bats these days make the ball easier to hit further. So it's an equipment thing for me more than anything else. What is the women's game looking for in terms of, are they looking for more bounce and more speed? I think there's nature for that, because more bounce and more speed means you can hit the ball further if you get it right. So I think equipment is right. Now, you've got to be careful when you start talking about a cricket ball becoming lighter, because the lighter a ball is to hit, the harder it is to hit it a long way. For instance, you look at a tennis ball, you can't hit a tennis ball as far as a cricket ball. You cannot hit a ping pong ball as far as a cricket ball. They just don't go far enough. It's the weight that takes them. If they can make a smaller cricket ball and keep the weight in there, so they get all those elements, it gets a bit more bounce, it gets a little bit more speed that you can use as a batsperson, but you also have that ability to hit it a long way, because the weight factor carries it a long way. So I think there is scope for that, and sure, they've got maybe have smaller hands, it's easier to catch. I'm not sure about that. That would be a trial and error thing for me. But yes, equipment as opposed to dimensions. I think Sophie Devine's on the right track, and I mean, she's probably the best all-rounder in world cricket, or one of them at the moment. So she's probably pretty equipped to say those things, and I'm with her. It does need a little bit more spice for me, to be fair.
Okay, there you go. The word from Ian Smith and Harsha Bhogle on innovations in women's cricket. I'm sure this is a topic that's going to have us talking for quite a while longer, but it's really exciting that we're having these conversations, that we're opening the floor and asking for input from all over. Now, in our Hall of Fame feature, we're turning our attention to the inaugural member of the Hall of Fame, inducted in 2009, one of the greatest all-rounders to play the game, one of the greatest captains in the history of cricket. And on the 25th of June this week, 37 years ago, in 1983, he became the youngest captain to ever lift the Cricket World Cup. You mentioned that Cricket World Cup triumph just a few minutes ago. Harsha Bhogle, Kapil Dev. Tell us about the impact. What did he bring to Indian cricket? Where were they when he joined the party in the late 70s?
I mean, you ask the average Indian, what does Kapil Dev mean to you? They'll probably say 175 not out, and they will say 1983 World Cup, both of which, of course, happened the same way. In the 175 not out against Zimbabwe took India from 17 for 5 to win the game. But 434 wickets for an Indian fast bowler, you need to put that in context. Kapil Dev arrived in 1977-78. Before that, we had Madan Lal, we had Abid Ali, whose speed was about Karsan Ghavri. Ghavri a little quicker, but about, well, even he came a little later, about 120, 125, 128, thereabouts. Only a few years before that, you had Sunil Gavaskar taking the new ball. One of the games, you had Eknath Solkar bowling the new ball. And in 67, when India went to England, Tiger Paradi looked up and said, who? And whoever caught his fancy took the new ball before the spinners came along. And suddenly, here was a bowler. Jeffrey Boycott says in 79, when Kapil Dev went to England, he was very sharp and had the outswinger. So suddenly, it was okay for a young Indian to dream of bowling quick. Now, as Kapil Dev went along, the pace dropped because he said, I had to bowl 25 overs in a day, every single day of my life. And so the pace dropped a little bit, but he was sharp when he came along. And to a lot of us, when Kapil Dev came, I was 17, 18 years old. I looked and said, wow, an Indian is going to bounce another a foreign batsman. It's all been one-way traffic. So to me, that was Kapil Dev's greatest contribution. I mean, 400 wickets, 5,000 runs, all that is there. But to tell the world that an Indian can bowl quick, I mean, look what happened. Post Kapil Dev, Javagal Srinath arrived. Post Javagal Srinath, Zahir Khan and that whole gang arrived. And now you've got Bumrah, Ishant, Shami, you've got so many. So I think he set in motion a trend that we need to be grateful for in India.
Ian Smith, your career had a big overlap with Kapil Dev. What was his defining performance in your eyes?
Talking about the Haryana Hurricane here, Kapil Dev. So that was to back up the pace that Harsha Bhogle was talking about. He defined all-rounder for me, and he's a very, very smart cricketer. You never ever wrote India off when Kapil Dev had a part to play in the game, because he could do it with both bat and ball, and he could inspire other people to do it. That's why he was a very good captain. He had all the attributes. He was part of a four-pronged club back in those days, which consisted of himself, Richard Hadley, Ian Botham and Imran Khan. Now, it's not very often you get, some of those guys are once-in-a-lifetime cricketers. We had four of those players playing at the same time, which showed what a great era of cricket that was. Harsha mentioned 5,000 runs, 400 wicket double. I think he's the only guy that's done it. Someone might have got it now, but only recently, because I think he's the only player in the history of the game to do that. He scored 8 Test hundreds. Let's not forget about that. That is an amazing achievement. That's as good as a lot of batsmen do. 434 wickets. He went past Richard Hadley on 431, and then not long after that, he gave it away. Played 131 Test matches, half of which, or maybe more, in Indian conditions, which showed what a heart he had, because many, many bowlers who have been great bowlers around the world would not, on those barren pitches in that heat, have been able to play that many games of cricket, let alone play them as well as Kapil Dev was able to do. Look, he's in the top 10 all-rounders, I think, in the history of the game, going way back to Sobers, and then including Cullis and Pollock and all these guys of recent vintages. And he fully deserves to be high up that list as well. I'd take my hat off to Kapil Dev, one of the finest opponents, and I think very, very brilliant cricketers that I played against, and made Indian cricket all the better for it.
Can I jog Smithy's memory on a couple of issues? Smithy, were you in England in 1982, that great summer when Botham was doing well, Richard Hadley was doing so well, and then India followed New Zealand and Kapil Dev did very well? That must have been a great time to be playing cricket. Also, there was a game where Jeremy Coney pulled out a white hanky when Kapil Dev was batting. Were you around at that game?
Yeah, I was actually. That was a one-day international and a tri-series, Harsha. Remember the tri-series that they had in Australia, the Benson and Hedges World Series, and the tri-series, and India, New Zealand, Australia at tri-series. a game at the Gabba, and Jeremy Coney was bowling, and Kapil Dev hit him for 1 or 2 or 3 massive sixes, dead straight down the ground. And he simply gave up. He got the white handkerchief out and said, I surrender. You've beaten me today. Very funny man, Jeremy Coney, and he was so right to surrender because Kapil Dev had him that day. And yes, I remember that time in 82, 83, 84 with those great all-rounders going right through, actually, throughout the 80s, where they all had their great moments. But as I said, Kapil Dev never took a back step to anybody, and neither he should either. Fantastic and lovely bloke too. I should have added that. Really, really pleased to have said I was an opponent of his. It's a terrific player.
Awesome stories. Thank you so much for sharing, guys. We're going to keep sharing. Brought to you by our friends at booking.com. We are asking you for your cricketing wish list, your favorite places to play, to watch, to tour to, and what tournament from the past you would have liked to play in. So now we have our guests here, and we can start the party with your input. Where was your favorite venue to play at, Ian Smith?
Well, I was most successful. I had my best days at home, really. My favourite ground in New Zealand was the Basin Reserve, but I never really did magnificent things there. We had some good wins there. I scored a couple of Test hundreds at Eden Park, which will always live long in my memory. Of course, they were the only 2 I got, so I did pretty well there. But well, I love travelling around the world to play cricket and absorbing those grounds that I'd heard about as a kid and to be part of them. And fortunately, I was a part of a lot of them, Elma, before they changed shape or changed dimension or changed in terms of what they looked like, how big they were, the vastness of the MCG. The most amazing feeling you have when you walk down those steps to walk up to bat at Lords and someone mentions your name and there's some applause, polite applause for you, and they applaud you even if you get ignored. I mean, that's the beauty there. But playing cricket in India, Eden Gardens, packed house at Eden Gardens, how do you match atmosphere like that? And I was lucky to play in Pakistan as well, in Lahore, interesting places, Karachi there. And a lot of players, sadly, will have gone through their career and not had that opportunity for various reasons that are simply not cricketing reasons. And that's a great shame. So look, I could list any number, then ask me to put one on it. Lords.
Harsha Bhogle, you are one of the most well-travelled cricket commentators of the current crop. So when we ask you where your favourite place is to commentate, is it at home? Because I do know that you enjoy a bit of travel.
I don't mind the travel at all, actually. It gives you all the memories. The newer grounds in India have better commentary positions, more comfortable positions, whether it's in Hyderabad or Visakhapatnam or Ranchi, the new Wankhede Stadium. They're more comfortable grounds, more comfortable commentary box as well. So they're all right. But typically the newer stadiums have media boxes that have been well made. But before you go back to when the boxes were made, I'll tell you where the best view came from. It came from before Trent Bridge started growing higher and higher, and it came at Port Elizabeth. You're right on top of the action, aren't you, in Port Elizabeth, Elma? I've never been at a ground where you get the feeling you're sitting on top of the side screen there. So that was one ground I remember. For different reasons, I remember Dunedin because it was the coldest I've ever been, ever. I did commentary with someone's wicket-keeping gloves on. It was that cold. Can you imagine an Indian going up to Dunedin? So I actually, in the 92 World Cup, I was doing commentary with Jeremy Coney with wicket-keeping gloves on just to stay warm. So the newer grounds in India, yes, very good. But generally these days, the commentary boxes are very good. Nothing like when I started off as a kid doing rugby, where you had a bamboo ladder in between the crowd. And if you made a mistake, they looked up to you and told you what they thought of you. So it's a lot easier now.
So the great thing about professional cricket and being a commentator on this circuit is that you get to go to places like the Caribbean for work. What's your favorite country to tour to, Ian Smith?
One of my most memorable tours was actually to the West Indies. And the reason why is because it was probably the hardest 2 or 3 months of cricket I've ever had in my life, because of the daunting task of taking on the West Indies side then, but in particular the fast bowling quartet that they have, which was so strong. And so that was, to get through that, we were beaten soundly in the one day as 5-0. We lost the Test series 2-0, but it was the hardest cricket. I'll never forget that. Australia, I love Australia because everything it's on a platter for you. They make it so easy for you to tour there. The facilities are good, but the grounds generally have great atmosphere. And then you go to India and you experience a whole different culture about life as a player. It teaches you so much. If you just don't close your mind and think of yourself as a cricketer the whole time and open it up to the fact that you've got so much to learn about these places, it's so much more enriching. And there's nothing like touring England, not just the Test grounds, but the county grounds, the character of the county grounds. You go to Canterbury and play with a tree in the middle of the ground. And then you've got the slope at Lords, you've got the slope at Sussex. You get all those beautiful little idiosyncrasies that all those wonderful grounds possessed back in those days before they changed a wee bit. Look, I remember so many of them. It's almost impossible to drag a country out, but I look forward all the time to challenging Australia. It didn't come off on top very often, but that for most New Zealand sportsmen, because they're our neighbour, our big brother, is the biggest challenge that we have.
Have you got a favourite country to tour to, Harsha?
Yes, I did, because good things happen to my career every time I went there. I loved going to Australia. England's great because there's no flights, and you're never too far from a park. You walk a lot. I like countries where you can walk a lot, but I just love the whole atmosphere for cricket in Australia. They come hard at you. You're allowed to have strong opinions. I made a lot of friends there. Lovely grounds, big grounds. If you can win in Australia, nothing like it. That doesn't happen too often with Indian teams. Happened recently, but yes. In New Zealand, one ground which I found difficult to work on because it was so scenic was Queenstown. Queenstown and Dharamshala to me are the two prettiest cricket grounds. But you go to Queenstown and you're just looking around everywhere and going, wow, this is some place. And then you realize, sorry, I've got to actually talk cricket too.
Focus. Now,
just one more to Elma. One more favourite ground for me is any ground where I can commentate the All Blacks beating the Springboks. Any ground.
Oh, of course you were just going to throw that in there. You wouldn't let me just live it down just for a moment. Which ICC tournament would you choose to play again, or would you have most liked to play in? Because of the vibe at the tournament, the place it was hosted, perhaps what went down. Harsha, let's start with you.
Easy one. Any match, because I haven't played any, but I would have loved to be part of the adventure of the first T20 World Cup in South Africa. I mean, I saw the adventure from outside the boundary rope and I enjoyed the world sort of marching into the unknown with optimism. But I would have liked to have been part of that that playing squad. There's always a sense of adventure, isn't there? 1932 Indian team goes to England. Wow, what a feeling it must have been. The 83 World Cup, yes, but that 2007, because it started a revolution in our game.
Smithy?
Yeah, I'm a bit with Harsha though. I never played against South Africa in South Africa. I only actually was able to play against them once in the 1992 World Cup, of course, because they weren't able to play it during most of my career. So I would like to have gone there as a player and to experience the competitiveness. Also, some wonderful grounds and facilities there. And to be honest, I would have liked to have been a part of a team playing there. I think that's really, really good. I mean, I think I played in 3 World Cups and I've commentated about 7. And my favourite one, Elma, I can honestly look at you straight between the eyes and say my favourite one will be the next one. And I hope it's soon.
Thank you so much for joining us, gents. The sky certainly is the limit, whether it comes to technological innovations in broadcast, the equipment that women's cricketers might be using in the future. And of course, we're all looking forward to taking to the skies again someday soon. So your homework this week is to get stuck in and send us your input on the booking.com cricketing wish list questions. Where would you want to play, watch, tour to, and which ICC tournament is it that you'd love to go back in time and go play in if you had the ability? Let us know on social media. Thank you so much to our phenomenal guests on Cricket Inside Out this week, Mr. Ian Smith and Harsha Bhogle.